How you guys doing? Show of hands, who here is on LinkedIn? Who's interested in building their personal brand for whatever reason? And who here thinks they've absolutely figured out the personal branding thing on LinkedIn? Not a single hand. Maybe your hand. So you guys are in for a treat. Today I'm here with Justin Welsh. He's I consider him the expert in personal branding, and we're going to talk about using social, using email to build your personal brand across all these platforms. For those of you who don't know Justin, he is a former sales exec at 2 unicorns. He is a creator, writer, educator with over 1 million followers. He's earned over $10 million in revenue with 90% margins as a one-person business, a solopreneur. And I think it might have been you who coined the term solopreneur, but whenever I think of that word, I think of you. And so, and you're also an LP, an angel investor across multiple companies. Kit, who was here earlier, Acquire, Gumroad, and an LP in the GTM fund. So just another round of applause for Justin, and thank you for joining us here.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
So I'd like to rewind back to 2020. You just walked away from an executive role, CRO role, and you quit your job and you started building your personal brand and started building your own business. Just take us back there. What was that like? And what was it like quitting a unicorn?
It was sort of like a necessary thing, I guess, when I think back to it. I got a job as a chief revenue officer hey Matt, how you doing, buddy? Just give you another shout out there. Got a job as a CRO in 2015, and I was really young. I was, I think, 32 or 33 years old at the time. And I assumed that I was going to grow this business maybe to $1 million or $2 or $3, and then they would go find someone who had done it before and hire over me, and that would be sort of, I would get downgraded, and that would be my career. And it went really well. I was able to help grow that business to $70 million in recurring revenue in about 4.5 years. But what happened is I really overworked myself really, really badly. And as we hit 50 and 60 and 70 million, I didn't really know what to do. I hadn't been in that position before. And I often talk about it as like if you've ever played Tetris before and you get to like the levels, I know I'm really, again, aging myself, Tetris, and like you get to the levels and the pieces start falling really fast and they just stack up on top of each other so quickly that you can't get out of it. That's kind of what my life felt like. And so I had this panic attack in December of 2018, and it was not a fun experience if you've ever had a panic attack before. I've had a few more since, but that was my first one. And I knew that I was overworking myself. So to kind of get to your question, I was forced. Like I went to my CEOs and I said, this isn't working for me. And they asked me if I would stick around for another 6 months. It turned out to be 8 months. And I didn't know what I was going to do. So I went on to social media, and I was afraid of Twitter at the time because I thought it was just a bunch of mean people kind of taking pot shots at each other. Turns out that's true. So I jumped on LinkedIn, and I was like, I'm going to share all the stories that I've learned building this business. And so I did. And back in 2018, no one was really writing on LinkedIn, but it felt safe, and it felt like I could find my voice in a place where people weren't calling me names. And so that's what I did, and it was interesting. People really latched onto it and started following me. And by the time I left my job, and on August 1st of 2019, I had built a pipeline to do a lot like what Nicole did. I took my skills and knowledge and I started consulting for early stage healthcare companies. And that was the launch of my first business.
And so today you have over 1 million followers. Mm-hmm. You have hundreds of thousands of newsletter subscribers across multiple products. When you first started, what did that look like? What did your first post look like? And how did you learn to write well?
They look really bad, actually. So if you go back, if you have the patience to scroll backwards on LinkedIn and find posts from 2018, they look terrible. I mean, I was a terrible writer. I didn't know how to format things. There were lots of hashtags and emojis and all the stuff that I cringe at today. But that's sort of how you learn to write. If you don't look backwards 5 years or 6 years or 10 years on your writing and cringe terribly, then you probably haven't become a much better writer. And so it was like very broetry, very like Josh Fector. If anyone remembers, he wrote something called the Bible of copywriting or something. So I read it and just tried to mimic what I saw him doing because I didn't know how to write. And that was how I started attempting to find my voice, if you will.
Does the cringing still happen today? Because I've been writing and I've read all your stuff. And so I've been writing for like 2 years now and I still cringe my own stuff. But does that ever go away?
No. We might talk about it later, but like I just launched something new and I just had to write an email about it. And my wife and I were sitting in the kitchen and I was like, I was like hesitating, finger over the button, still getting really nervous, still feeling like it's not written right, feeling like a line might be misconstrued or something that I said might be misinterpreted. And so I still have those feelings, albeit much less than I did back in 2018 or 2019. But yeah, I still read stuff from last week and I was like, that was terrible. Yeah, it's part of the game though, right? Like even if professional sports players go out and play a game and are like, oh, I played terribly today. And that happens to me every single week.
I'm sure a lot of the folks here are wondering, how you did $10 million in revenue at 90% margins as a one-person business. So I'd love it if you could walk us through your entire operating system, like all the products you sell and all the business lines within your portfolio.
So I had a really unregimented approach to building products because that's how I like to do it. And so I started by doing healthcare consulting, and after a while I was trading my time for money. So I was charging an hourly rate or a project rate, and maybe many of you can resonate with this, but you often find yourself in a situation where you're doing the same thing you were doing at work. You're just doing it for yourself, and you're like, oh, this is just like having a job. And so I was like, okay, how do I sort of disconnect from some of that time? And so what I did is, as I was writing about healthcare and growing my following, I had only grown maybe 15 or 20,000 followers on LinkedIn, which today is like having a lot more because back then it wasn't really a social platform. And I was reading all of my DMs, and a lot of them were from healthcare executives saying, hey, I want you to help me grow the sales team or the marketing strategy or whatever it might be. But kind of in between that was a lot of questions people asked about, like, how do you write on LinkedIn? How do you grow? How do you tell stories? And so I was like, I was like reading Russell Brunson at the time. I'm sure we've all been through that phase, and like going through the books and trying to figure out how to do webinars and like just guessing, right? And so I thought, I'm going to try and do what he recommends, and I'm going to set a camera up, record for 30 minutes, and push out this course. And I did, and it was $50, and I made like 75 grand in like 12 months. And I was like, holy cow, this is a thing. You can do this. And at that point, I started leaning into that. So I just followed that signal. And so I released another course on how to grow on LinkedIn, and people liked that. So I started selling the LinkedIn operating system. And then I got invited onto a podcast with Dickie Bush and Nicholas Cole to go over how I create 25 pieces of content in a week. And people's eyes lit up. So I was like, oh shit, I should record that. So I like recorded that and then put it into a product and then sold it. And then like realized nobody was a solopreneur. Not a lot of people were just one-person businesses. So I thought, I'll start writing about that. And then I recorded the Creator MBA. So every time I have like an interest in my own personal life, I write about it. And then I see if it resonates. And if it resonates, I turn the knowledge and skills into a product that's digital, and I sell it. So I have the LinkedIn operating system, the content operating system, the Creator MBA, and like an email that I send out with some templates that you can use. And those 3 courses together have done 10 million in revenue.
Wow. And they're all connected through your personal brand. What does it all feed into? Is there one like personal newsletter that feeds into these other newsletters? Like what does the ecosystem look like?
Yeah, it's essentially I write on Twitter and LinkedIn primarily. I have an Instagram account that I post on Threads, but I don't really pay much attention to it. It's just kind of repurposed from the primary platforms. And my goal is to drive people to my newsletter, which is called the Saturday Solopreneur. Really get them, I think about it like discovery, right? You get discovered on LinkedIn, Twitter, other platforms by sharing nuggets. And you get a lot of good data from those nuggets because you can see what resonates. Once you get discovered, you have an opportunity to essentially build trust and show your expertise. So my goal is to move them from a discovery platform like social media into my newsletter. And my newsletter is longer form, so I have 4 minutes to show off, right, for lack of a better description. And so inside of that 4-minute newsletter, my goal is to show off, to show that I know what I'm talking about, that I actually, there's more than just written fluff, right? There's some substance underneath the hood. And so that's my chance to do that. And my hypothesis is that over the course of time, if I can show every single week that there's a lot of substance here, then that will grow trust. And if I grow trust, then I have an opportunity when the time is right to serve up those products and say, you found me, you trust me, here's a product, it's really affordable, it's got 1,000 testimonials that are 5 stars. Like, this is an easy win for you to quickly pay for it without having to think about it a lot because they're not high ticket prices. And so I've converted 40 to 50,000 students that way.
I like the idea that every piece of content you put out there, so whether it's a LinkedIn post or a Twitter post, it's sort of it's a test to see whether or not people find it valuable. And from there, you can create longer form pieces of content, and then maybe there's a monetization opportunity there. We had Sam Parr on the stage last year, and he talked about the idea of a base hit, which I'd never heard about before, because I think when people think about starting businesses, they're always like, how do I get this massive outcome? And maybe that's $1 million, maybe it's $10 million. But I think in his scenario, he was saying, well, how do you make like $10,000? In your case, your first project was $75,000. What advice do you have for people out there who are looking for their base hit, like their first project? How should they approach that? What numbers should they think about?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's funny that he uses that term. Like, I talk about not base hit, but hitting singles. So like my idea with everything is, and I'll try not to wear out like sports analogies, but like my idea is that you go up and you swing for a single. And every once in a while you accidentally hit a double, and sometimes you swing for a single and the ball goes over the fence. And like you're like, oh, I hit a home run by accident. And so that's a really good way to approach things, I think. So what I often recommend when people are just getting started is they start with content that is helpful. So I think Dan Coe wrote this the other day, and he's a good friend of mine, and like he said, people come onto social media and like day one they're Marcus Aurelius, right? They're like philosopher kings and queens on social media, right? It's a common thing to do because you see other people waxing poetic and being philosophical, and you're like, oh, that's what you do to be popular, right? I guess. And what you don't see is the 8 years before, where the reason that people grew those brands was just being genuinely helpful. So if I were to order these things in like a project, how I might approach it is say, first of all, be useful, like in real life at some thing, some knowledge, some skill, whatever it is you do at work, whatever it is that friends come to you for, your family asks you for, what you do in your personal time, what you study. Everybody knows something. I get emails from people and they're like, I have no skills or knowledge, what should I do? That's not true. Everybody has skills and knowledge, right? And if you don't, get some first. That's like step one. Step two is taking the skills and knowledge that you have and talking about them in a way that's genuinely helpful to other people. So some examples that I've often seen are like, last week I met with a client, or last week I was at work and I was working through this marketing project with my team, and here's a challenge that we had. Here are the 3 different solutions that we laid out. Here's my hypothesis and here's what we did. Here's what worked, here's what didn't work. Is that useful or helpful to anyone? There will be some people, it's not gonna go viral, right? Because it's not viral content, but it's going to go semi-viral within a small group of 10, 20, 30, 40 people that find that content useful. And all you got to do is continue to add on to that, hit that single every single day. What is going to happen over time if you learn to write well, which is sort of like another check mark in there, is people will come into your comments and say, well, what about X, or what about Y, or how did you do Z? Those are signals in a bunch of noise, right? A bunch of AI comments, and then you get a really genuine question. And it's like, take that offline. Just like Nicole said before, like ask for something. DM the person and say, hey, really great question. Not sure if you have 15 minutes, but I'd love to jump on and see if I can work through that problem with you, right? No pay. You don't need to pay me anything. No set price or anything. I just want to see if I can solve it for you. And pretty soon, have a few conversations, 4, 5, 6, you're solving problems, you're understanding the process. Then you focus your content around that one problem. And next time someone comes to your DM and asks you a question, or they ask you a question on your content, send them a DM and say, hey, I know how to solve that very, very easily. I've solved it for 6 other people in the last 2 weeks. It's $75. Not going to change your life, but it will change your mindset. Right? You'll make $75 online for the first time, and you'll be like, holy shit, I can actually make money online. And that's like an unlock for someone's brain, because then they understand, okay, cool, it's just a long game, and I can continue to work this process. So that's how I might think about it.
For some of the people out here who are just getting started, and maybe a few familiar faces, but they're the corporate athlete, they work in corporates, and they're looking to post on LinkedIn, but they're finding it really hard to take the first step because of the cringe and because they don't know if it's going to resonate well, and they don't know what their employer is going to think of it. what advice do you have for them? And is there normally a time period? I've talked to some folks who are like, you have to be posting for 2 years straight just to have any kind of momentum. What are your thoughts on that?
My first thought is people often come to me and say, I've been posting for 6 months and my boss is really mad, right? Ask your boss first. That's a good starting point, right? So when I was going to go do my LinkedIn posting in late 2018, early 2019, I went to my co-CEOs, Luke and Travis, and I said, hey, building a personal brand is really important to me. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it on this platform. I'm going to be talking about building the business. I'm not going to give away any company secrets. I'm not going to do it during working hours. I'm going to do it before work and after work. It's not going to get in the way of me achieving my outcomes or doing my role. Are you guys okay with that? Yes, great, permission granted, right? So that's the first thing is like talk to your boss, and if you manage a team, also set expectations. Because the first time something goes wrong, it's gonna be because Justin is on LinkedIn, right? Your team is gonna get mad or upset. So if you set the expectation with your team, at least they know that that's coming as well. So it's managing up and it's managing down. That is sort of the very first thing that I would do. The second thing that I would do is write with the understanding that you're not going to make any money. Like, don't be like, oh, I might hit post and make $1,000 and that's going to be really fun. You should go into it with the mindset of, for the first year, I'm not really doing this to make money. I'm doing this to find my voice. And the reason I say that is because every single person who has a lot of followers on social media has something that they're really good at in terms of medium creation. They are either a great writer, they produce excellent video, they draw or design wonderful visuals, they're tremendous interviewers on audio, they're good at the skill of delivering through a medium. And it takes a year or 18 months or 24 months. Some people will do it faster, some will do it slower, is developing those skills. For me, I like to write. And so my advice to people is do the thing that you like to do. If you don't like being on video, don't force yourself on video. The easiest way to be consistent is to do something you actually enjoy doing. I like writing, so I write every day. And over the last 6 years, I've found my voice and I'm still finding my voice. But I would set the expectation of like, I don't make money for a year, and if I do make $10,000, like that's good cream on top. Once you get to 50 or 60 or 70% of your take-home earnings from your job after you kind of figure out the game a little bit, then maybe you can quit your job and invest your time into creating more content. You get 40 hours a week back. But like, my personal advice would not be quit your job tomorrow and go start talking on the internet about the things you know. I would do them in tandem until you get a little traction.
I think you've talked a lot about not burning the boats, whereas a few entrepreneurs are like, burn the boats and go all in and put your life savings in this new thing. But you're about sort of minimizing a risk and like building on the side until it reaches a certain level of traction.
Yeah, I don't believe in getting blindsided by survivorship bias. It's easy to come up and to say, you know what, everybody should quit their job tomorrow and start their own business. Because it works for one person. The question you have to ask yourself is, okay, how many other people made the same choice and it didn't work, right? That's survivorship bias, and that's what people get blinded by. So there's no right or wrong way. I would just say that over the course of my lifetime, I have seen more people get burned by just quitting their job and not having anything to fall back on than I have someone saying, I methodically built my income up to 50, 60, or 70% of my take-home earnings. And when I got 40 hours a week to work on it, yeah, it was easy to go from 70 to 100%. That to me is a safer bet. That's just my personal opinion.
Bit of a pivot, but when I was first putting together the questions for this talk, it was all going to be about LinkedIn. But then I remember reading an email that you had sent out about a week ago, launching your new thing called Unsubscribe. So I'd love for you to share a little bit more about Unsubscribe and your new thesis on whether it's, you call it creator economy or like the social media platforms, X and LinkedIn.
Yeah, and I'll kind of give the same caveat that I do before a lot of these talks, which is like, if I say something, it's probably wrong. Like I say a lot of wrong things, but I feel like I'm right on this one, and so I take it with a grain of salt. But I'm finding social media platforms to feel different today. I log on to X, and it's like my For You feed is just all culture wars, and I'm just personally not interested in the culture, war landscape. So that feels like not a place I love spending my time as much as I used to spend my time. And when I click over to my following feed, I don't see a lot of the familiar faces and voices that I used to see because I feel like they're publishing other places. And when I go onto LinkedIn, what I see is a lot of the same stuff, but slightly different. I see a lot of performance and posturing and selfies and checklists and AI comments and AI stuff. And what I'm realizing is we're reaching sort of that old, conspiracy theory, the dead internet theory, where it's like it's just bots talking to bots on the internet. It's not real people talking to each other anymore, which feels pretty depressing, I think, and is not like a space I want to go hard into. So I'm leaning towards more creative writing just in my own personal life, in places where I think real creative writers are spending their time. I recently launched a Substack. I think that that's a place where a lot of creative writers are writing really good stuff and people are commenting and thriving really well. So I'm trying to think about how do I get ahead of eventually being in a place where I get 5,000 engagements, but who knows how many of them are real. So that's something I'm thinking about on a regular basis because it hinders your business.
I've been thinking about the idea of the dead internet theory as well a lot, and I can't think of a better person to sort of speak to it than you. As I scroll down my LinkedIn feed, it's all what you call AI slop. And so it's like AI generated posts, AI generated comments. I have no clue how much of that is just completely AI driven, but I'm assuming a large majority. Where do you think all these platforms or all these text-based platforms are heading? Like if it's just bots engaging with bots, what is LinkedIn going to look like in the next 5 years?
I think they're going to thrive because they're going to figure out a way to handle it. That's like my thesis is that these aren't dumb companies, right? Like if culture wars ultimately negatively impacts X so badly, they will find a way to solve that problem. If AI commenting and AI slop ultimately affects LinkedIn, Microsoft is not going to let that be the case, right? So I do think that they will probably solve those problems. I think in lieu of solving those problems, there are things that we can do as creators to hedge our bets, right? To think more intelligently about some of the stuff that's going on. It's part of why I started Unsubscribe, because I thought to myself, what if tomorrow I could not reach the 10,000 people most likely to buy a future product or service from me? And that was a pretty depressing thought, right? Things would be hard. So I thought, well, I'm going to start going deeper in one-to-one or one-to-many relationships. And so I built a membership. And to me, a membership is really a healthy way to go because number one, you get people who like what you're talking about. So they're fans or they're followers or their ideal customer profile, and they come in and instead of being dependent on a platform, you now have Substack notes. Yes, it's a platform, but you also have chat where you can just chat with people who like what you're talking about. And that to me is a good bet in this era of sort of anyone can be a creator. Someone wrote a really interesting post about it the other day. I think it was Brendan Cassidy on LinkedIn said, a lot of the sales leaders from my former days who are actually really good sales leaders, they're not on LinkedIn anymore because a 22-year-old can graduate and just throw together a bunch of content and say, what would a 45-year-old, 20-year experienced CRO say on LinkedIn? Take a picture of themselves, throw it up there, and it's getting more engagement. Who wants to compete with that? Right? So I certainly don't. And so I'd much rather spend my time one-to-one or one-to-many, and so that's what I'm building.
I think a lot of the creators seem to be migrating off, or like you said, hedging their bets. And you have this really good concept that you've coined, or I think you coined it, the idea of rented land or borrowed audience. Can you tell us a little bit more about a borrowed audience, maybe an owned audience, and a monetized audience?
Sure. Yeah, I certainly didn't create that, but yeah, but your audience is borrowed, right? On October 25th of 2021, there was a glitch on LinkedIn and my profile got locked. Never had happened to me. I'd heard it happening to everybody in the world except for me. And I logged in one day. I was sitting in Hula co-working space in Burlington, Vermont. And I logged in and I was like, oh, I can't get into my account. And my heart started beating because I was like, oh, this is it's like where my business lives, and suddenly I was like, oh no. I emailed them and they emailed me back and they're like, hey, there was a glitch, everything's fine. But I was like, okay, I just envisioned a world of like where I couldn't reach anyone. And so I started writing on Twitter that very day. You can scroll back October 25th, 2021. And so to me, like it just showed me how borrowed the land is. Like the land can be confiscated from you at any time if you break a rule or do the wrong thing or say the wrong thing, right? And so I want to, and I don't love the term own, I can't think of a better term, an owned audience, right? So anytime that you have an email address, you can reach that person until they decide that you can no longer reach them through an unsubscribe, right? And so I wanted to start moving everybody to my email list as fast as possible because to me, like if you look at the chart of my revenue every week, like Saturdays are my big revenue days because that's when an email goes out to 200,000 people. I hopefully show off some nugget of expertise and they buy things. And so that to me is like the most important way to have an audience that you can communicate with, that you can launch things to. And that's why I recommend, even if you don't have a large audience, start writing somewhere that they can subscribe to. Make a lead magnet. Do something that's useful that people can download where you can capture an email address, especially to the extent that that thing is related to the expertise and skills that you have.
Can you elaborate on lead magnet? I know what it means, but I don't think most, some of the folks here.
Lead magnet, it just means something that you trade an email address for. So, I like videos. Like I think there's no better sort of chance to show off your expertise than to solve someone's problem in less than 10 minutes. So, if you talk about how to run Facebook ads, just the first thing that came to my mind. Like record a 10-minute video, it's like how to do X, right? And X is never like how to run all Facebook ads. It's like, how do you solve this one little problem that people have generally at the beginning of their journey, right? So if you can solve the first problem they run into, they become better at that thing and they go further in your journey. And at the end, who do you think's waiting for them? You. You've already helped them at the beginning. They're going to come up against other problems. You want to be there to be the first person they interact with that you solve an early problem for. And when you solve that early problem, you become the go-to person for them on the rest of their journey. So create something that solves what I call this early narrow problem, a very specific problem that your customers are going to have in the very first part of their journey. Do it really well, do it effectively, and later in their journey, you become the obvious choice for them to come back to.
Not a lot of people know this, but when I was first starting out and I had no audience, I used lead magnets to build my audience. And so I just arrived in New York. And I would post on Twitter, and I would post this picture of a really nice venue, like a rooftop bar. And I'd be like, I'm throwing a party. Who wants to come? Just comment below. Put your email below. And I wasn't throwing a party. I just wanted people's emails. And that's how it got the first 100 people to show up at my parties. And I kept abusing that until I built like 1,000 or 2,000 people. But if in case you're wondering how like this started, it was through the infamous lead magnet. All right, so I'd like to pivot to maybe more broadly entrepreneurship. You're also, you're obviously a creator and educator, but you're also an entrepreneur and investor. Today, what is your method of coming up with new ideas for your businesses? And so you just launched Unsubscribe. I imagine you're going to launch many other things down the road. What is your process of coming up with profitable new ideas to pursue?
It's a good question. I don't have a great answer, unfortunately, and probably not an answer that you should like model your future business around by any means. But like, I'm very inspired, and I got into, I guess, like the online game back in 2018, 2019. I was following guys like Daniel Vassallo, if anyone knows who he is, in his small bets group. Like, I follow him because he was just writing about working at Amazon, and then he released an ebook on like how to use Amazon Web Services, which I don't care at all about, to be quite frank. But like, he was making money sharing his experience and what he thought was interesting, and then he pivoted into something that he found more interesting, and then released a product about it, and then pivoted again. And I was like, oh, what a cool life you can live where you can just write about whatever is interesting to you at the time, right? So I started writing about healthcare consulting and became a healthcare consultant. And then people were like, how do you do LinkedIn? And I was like, yeah, I'll write about LinkedIn. So I started writing about that and selling courses. Then people are like, how do you create content? So I started talking about content and then solopreneurship. And now I'm talking about the intersection of life and business. How do you build a better life through business that's supported by business? Because that's what's interesting to me. And so it's not a great method or model to just write about all the things that interest you, because then you end up writing about your favorite pizza restaurants and then your kids and then your trip to Italy, and that can be messy. But like, start with something today that interests you, that you like writing or recording about, right? That you have deep skills and knowledge in. And don't feel tethered to that for the next 10 years of your life. I have friends who run multi-million-dollar businesses writing about stuff they hate, right? That doesn't sound that great. I'm just gonna be honest. Money is fun, as Nicole said, but writing about and acting about and talking about stuff you hate sucks. So like, find the thing you like, write about it, make it a business. But at some point, if you start to pivot as a human being, start to think about how you can pivot and control the narrative, right? I have this narrative where it's like, oh, I was a healthcare consultant, then people reached out to me to learn about LinkedIn, so I pivoted into LinkedIn. That narrative makes sense. I've worked on it, right? So there's a narrative that you have to have as you pivot, but I always suggest do the things that are most interesting to you and find out how to control that narrative. That would be my advice, although maybe not for everybody.
I gave this short keynote yesterday about finding your second act and finding the next thing you want to work on as you pivot. Do you have any tactical advice on controlling the narrative as you pursue your next thing? How did you do it? Was it just through writing, through your own channels? Did you work with like a branding consultant?
No, I don't. I haven't worked with any branding consultants. Like, this goes back to another like thing that I think about a lot, which is by the way, I was a consultant, and I'm so sorry for those of you who are consultants in the room, but I often think that when you're working on businesses in real time, like, you know more about your business than a consulting firm. Like I remember I had a first conversation with, I won't actually say the name. It's a large firm that's very well known for branding and marketing and strategy, and like they put together a deck for me, and I just thought it was terrible. And I was like, I don't need anyone to help me with branding and marketing and narrative and storytelling. I know how to tell stories. I know how to control narratives. And if I don't, I'll go read a book about it, or I'll go study it and become better at it and be entrenched inside of my own business. And so what I think about is I'll brainstorm with my wife. I'll say like, okay, cool. I want to pivot from talking about LinkedIn every day, which I didn't want to talk about anymore. No offense to the headline. I wanted to talk about what it was like to build a one-person business. And I was like, how do you get out of LinkedIn and get into talking about a one-person business? So we just sat down and thought, okay, what's true? First of all, you don't want to lie. What's true? But then how do we massage that and shape that into a narrative that people could say, yeah, not only does that make sense, but like, I really like that narrative, right? I understand why he wanted to make that choice. It's just like any other exercise, right? Sit down, whiteboard, and create your story. You don't need a branding firm or a marketing team. Sorry again if anyone's in that field, but you probably don't need those folks.
It's cool to see it happen in real time, because I was looking at your LinkedIn and you've sort of like changed some, like your job title.
Yeah.
I think you've changed the headline. Your email is consistent with like the new business idea. So for those who don't follow Justin, it's cool to see this process happen right in front of you. Okay, so you've done 10 million in revenue, 90% margins, absolutely crushing it. I'm curious, what are some of the hard moments that people might not see? Can you think of your single hardest, and you briefly mentioned one earlier, but can you think of your single most difficult moment post quitting your job as CRO?
Yes. I like to think that my persona online is thoughtful, and I might use words like calm or confident. I took a particular headshot. I don't know if it's up there. Yeah, it is. Like trying to give off a feeling of strength and calm and confidence. In reality, I am very few of those things. I am a worrier. I have high anxiety. I get stressed out, right? Those are all very true things. I try and be as candid and transparent as possible about who I am. And so there are days, and my wife can attest to this, where like, I think it's all going away. It's all come to an end, right? Because one day's revenue doesn't look good. I convince myself that I'm canceled, right? Nobody cares anymore. You're irrelevant, and that can be that's a a poisonous part of playing the social media game, because we often attach ourselves to a lot of different outcomes through social media. How many likes, impressions, comments, reshares, revenue, those all in the beginning are numbers that you pay attention to, like business data, and over time they become part of your psyche, right? You start to judge yourself or base your authority or importance on some of those things. We're all human beings. None of us are great at getting away from that. And so those are really challenging moments that I would say happen every week, right? I'm always worried about my business falling apart. It's a constant worry in the back of my mind.
Have you dealt with, I know this is a common thing, but like haters, or how do you deal with haters?
Generally pretty well. When you have an audience, I was just talking to Greg Eisenberg about this, I think, the other day, and it's like, when you have an audience of 1 million people, you start to recognize what percentage of people are really upset, right? If you have 1.2 million followers or 200,000 people in your email list, like, you get some really shitty emails, right? And not just like, you suck. Like, there's like really shitty emails, right? And so I generally don't mind when people are like, I think you suck. Like, I'm like, okay, great. Like, I just unsubscribe them and that's it. Like, it's pretty simple, or I block them or whatever, because, I like to keep, this isn't a democracy. This is my email list, right? I control it. But when people take like the shots at me or my family, personal shots, it's certainly hurtful, right? Like, I think anyone who tells you it's not hurtful is lying to show a false air of confidence and bravado. I think it's super hurtful when people take shots at you. I then remember that the kind of person who would reply back to a helpful newsletter and be like, I hope you die in a fire, is probably not in a great mental space to begin with. So that generally gives me some pause to be like, okay, unsubscribe.
This is a bit of a tangent, but now I'm so curious. But as a public persona, millions of followers, how do you stay anonymous, or like keep the private parts of your life and the really important parts of your life anonymous and maintain that type of privacy?
I'm very rarely. So I'm almost never on video. So I don't like being on video. So I like doing stuff like this, but like I don't like turning the camera around. So I try and like not show that. I don't take pictures of myself or my wife or out on the town. Like, we just don't. It's not generally what we do. By the way, I know that by doing that, I could probably get closer to the audience, or like all these marketing tactics. But like, if everything is only about making an extra dollar, then what kind of life are you living? Like, what are you designing for, right? So I do that to stay private. We live in a town of 500 people in the middle of the mountains, so nobody in my town knows what I do, which is awesome. It's great. Like, you show up and no one's like, hey man, I follow you on LinkedIn and I wanted to ask you about how to build a landing page. Like, that's like really great that nobody like asks me those questions when I'm in my town. They're just like, what do you do? And I just say I'm a writer. And so I do that, and that's sort of how I maintain privacy.
I think we're coming up on time here. I have a few more questions. Sure. We've covered you as a creator, entrepreneur. You also invest in company. You've invested in a few companies. You're an LP in a fund. Can you talk about how that ties into everything else you do? And what types of founders come to you for money? Is it the ones that are looking for your access to distribution or your distribution? And how does that all tie together? Generally,
it's folks who want distribution, mostly on LinkedIn and X. But if I'm being like really transparent, most of what I do is just for friends. So like, I know Nathan from Kit. I know Sahil from Gumroad. So most of the investments I make is my way of sort of returning the success that I've had to people that I believe in. If I'm in a fortunate and advantageous position to write a check for somebody who's a friend of mine and has supported me in my journey, like, why wouldn't I do that? I don't write it because I think it's going to turn into some big multiple. Like, I'm not like some huge angel investor. And then go-to-market fund, which I'm actually no longer an LP at. I was an LP at for 3 years. The GP is Max Altschuler, who's a friend of mine, and like, I think he's smart and trust him, and so I gave him some money. And that's like my like lens through which I look at through investing. I don't have like a big thesis on investing.
So the main thing is the education business, and everything else is sort of like a side quest. And
totally.
then this new thing is a side quest that might become a main thing at some point.
Yeah, it's like It's like all the side things that I do are kind of like trying to advance something good ahead because somebody else has supported me. They're in no way, shape, or form money-making ventures.
I guess last piece of advice or call to action to, I'm just looking at the people in this room. We have early stage CEOs. We have people who are working corporate, who are looking to build something on the side. We have some creators with massive followings, but are looking to build businesses underneath those followings. Any final piece of advice you'd like to share with this group before we hop off?
Yeah, I would say focus on three things. If I were just talking strictly about social media, the first thing that I would say is like choose the character that you're going to play. And when I say character, I don't mean make something up. I just mean how are you going to deliver the information to your audience? Some people tell stories. Other people do teardowns. Some folks do step-by-steps. Other people are just contrarian observations all the time. Like, how do you like to write? How do you like to video? How do you like to audio? How are you going to deliver the information to your audience? That's what I mean by character, right? After you figure out how you're going to deliver the information to your audience, and by the way, that might change over time as you learn what works and what doesn't work. Like, what is the outcome that you want your audience to have? I see this every single day on LinkedIn and Twitter where people are going viral by sharing something that, of course, will go viral because it is geared towards the majority of people. That's what viral means. It means lots of people like it. If by default, lots of people like what you write, then you're not really helping a specific person, right? Going viral does nothing for my business. I can write a post that gets 1/10 of the engagement on a very specific topic and sell 10x more. So figure out what is the one problem that you're going to solve for those people. So what's the character, i.e. how do you deliver through a medium? Second of all, what's the very specific problem that you're going to solve? And third, how do people buy it from you? Like Jennifer and I talk about this all the time. We go to websites and I'm like, I want to buy the product on the website and I cannot figure out how to do it. It's so difficult there's so much friction between you and the purchase that it makes it nearly impossible. So decide how you're going to communicate, decide what specific problem you're going to solve, and then make the purchase exceptionally easy. If you do that on a regular basis for 365 days in a row, you're going to learn a lot and it's going to be really, really difficult to fail.
That was a really great piece of tactical framework. For folks who want to learn more, how can they follow you to get more of this stuff? Just your website, justinwelsh.com or LinkedIn?
They can go to justinwelsh.me, so it's justinwelsh.me. Or if they want to check out the new membership that I'm doing, it's called Unsubscribe, and it is just theunsubscribed.co.
Cool. Well, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.